Hello, everyone, and welcome once again for the XP Property Experts podcast, which comes to you live every Friday, where Ben and myself go through the highs and lows of running multiple businesses that are turning over 6, 7, and 8-figure sums in some instances. And in this episode, we'll be sharing some tips that you can hopefully integrate into your business, whether it's construction or business itself. If you haven't tuned in before, we like sharing in these episodes not only what we go through as the struggles in business to help you improve yours, but also the wins that we've had this week. And this week is not one to miss. So we'll be sharing initially. So for you listeners, it's the 3rd of October when you'll be listening to this, just so you know the time frame. And we'll be sharing how we track our customers and manage their projects to start off, key people of influence and what that might entail. 3, I've just got back and I don't know what sort of hour I'm probably on as far as a body clock, but traveling with other business owners. I've been away with some other business owners, so I'll be sharing the sort of pros and cons and how we've been comparing our businesses, and I'll be sharing what my close friend runs as his business, and it's very unique compared to what we do. Managing variations in your building contracts. Ben and I will be attending the Property Investor Show. We went there last year, thoroughly enjoyed it. And we have a free giveaway. So if you haven't been to Property Investor Show, stay tuned for that. We'll be talking about HMOs and officer site visits. The officer should be your best friend or closest enemy. I'm not sure which one, but we'll be sharing a little tip for you in that capacity. We'll be talking about the importance of finding your utilities on site. And I'm sure Ben will go into detail about that. I've actually got a fun story about that on one of our sites that we did outside of XP. And then we'll also be sharing when to use high interest credit facilities, which again could be your best friend and worst enemy.
Good stuff. Welcome, everyone. If you tune into this regularly, we would love you to rate us on Spotify and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I was checking the other day, and about 2/3 of you actually listen on Apple. Only about 1/3 of you listen on Spotify. But either way, it's great to have you on board. And if you do like it, just share it with one person that you might get value from it. So, on to point number 1, how we track customers and manage their projects. So obviously we run numerous businesses. A couple of those are service-based businesses. And, the way that we work these and operate these systems can cross into any type of business, but from a service-based profession, it works really well when you're utilizing things like CRM, which is customer relationship management tools, together with digital project management tools that I'm just about to go through. So in Aura, we use MailChimp for our customer relationship management tool, CRM, and Asana for our project management. And then in XP Surveys and XP Property, instead of MailChimp, we use HubSpot, which is extremely powerful, but extremely costly. And we also use Asana in both of those businesses as well. So I know that we've talked about in the past jumping ship to other platforms like Monday, and we do plan to transition XP Property over to Monday over the next couple of months. We used to use Trello, which is another one. I know that there's quite a few platforms out there like Notion as well that people use for this type of project management, scheduling, assigning tasks to your team members, tracking timelines and milestones and progress and things like that. And there's a huge amount of productivity hacks out there like Asana that you can use to do that. What's the importance of these? Well, once you've only got a certain amount of memory in your brain, there's only so much stuff you can search for in your email database. So when a client reaches out and wants to work with you, you don't want to lose that client. So having them on a database where you can track all of the previous history, all the times they've reached out to you. You can also track integrations from other people's email inboxes. So if I email a client via my email inbox, but Jack wants to go into HubSpot and look at the CRM to see what I said to the client last, he can log into HubSpot and do that because all of the emails are tracked across the business. So that's what a CRM is for. And if you're not using one of them, you really are missing out on lots of opportunities to market to them, to store information, to improve your sales conversions and your funnels. And that's what these front end CRM platforms are very good for. One thing that we're looking at the moment, and I'd be interested to understand if anyone else is going through a similar process or used Zoho. So instead of MailChimp and Asana as separate pieces of technology and platforms, we've had a couple of demos recently, and I think we will probably jump ship very soon to use Zoho as a overarching CRM and a project management tool as well that also combines together. So Zoho have got loads of different plugins, loads of different platforms, but ultimately they will feed into each other. So what we found really, really difficult with Aura is having clients come in, marketing to them via MailChimp. We've got email marketing funnels that go out, and that's part of our sales campaigns. We've got all of their information in terms of contact details in MailChimp. But what it isn't very good at is the sort of the sales funnel, I think, is really clunky, whereas HubSpot is really good. Asana, on the other hand, is more of the project management. So what we find really difficult is having a spreadsheet in between MailChimp and Asana where we kind of lose track of the leads and it doesn't flow into a project management tool once the client signs up. So MailChimp is the front end. Once a client signs up, it goes over to Asana, but they don't talk to each other. So fundamentally, Zoho, we're looking to bring in to do that kind of that combined effort, getting them all the way through the sales funnel. And then once they become a genuine client of ours, utilize Zoho also for the project management, where you can see all of the previous history and the conversations that we've had. Any questions about that front end sales funnel, marketing, project management tools, all of the digital platforms that we use, drop them below, because we've done it all. We've tried them all. Would love to feedback any useful tidbits that we've got from that.
Nothing from me.
Cool. Good stuff. This one was something that I wanted to throw in there because I've been asked quite a lot recently, like, why do you bother doing all of this stuff? Why are you doing a YouTube show, a podcast? Why are you on Sky TV, Property Question Time, and why do we speak at events and things like that? And it's because of the key people of influence vibe. I've read every single book that Daniel Priestley has written. He is the master of this. If you haven't read his book, Key Person of Influence, then everything that I'm about to say now is within that book and much, much more. So the reason that we do this type of stuff, one, for me, it's about giving value. Like, the more value you give, the more reach you get, and the more people you can help, and the more people out there that can sort of share your message. And what that ultimately leads to is, from a financial incentive perspective, that comes back to you. The more people that you serve, the more money you're going to make. And it's quite a simple equation as far as I'm concerned. So the more we can get ourselves out there, the more value we can add to other people, the more that's going to come back in our direction. So it takes time and it takes effort to kind of build credibility, to be consistent with these things. We're almost 2 years into doing this podcast. We've done over 100. What have we done? Almost 100 episodes now, maybe more than 100 episodes. And all of that is building, great credibility. And you'll see from some of the questions that we go into later, the feedback that we get is extremely positive. A lot of people are getting a lot of good knowledge from tuning into these things on a regular basis. And it just means that when we have a conversation with an investor, that they've often seen a lot of the stuff we've been up to. We've already built their trust, and they already like us and feel like they know us. And we might have only spoken to that person 1 or 2 times, but we've already done all of that legwork because of all these things that we've done to gain influence and credibility in the industry. And I think we've said it before, where if you're going to a networking event, don't just go to a networking event to be in the audience. If you're going to a networking event, make sure that you stand up for the 20 seconds or the 30 seconds or whatever that networking event offers you, to stand up in front of everyone else and tell people what you do, who you're looking for, how you can help them, because you're then speaking to multiple people rather than getting around the room and only speaking to maybe 10 people and getting 5 business cards. If you're in front of the event, speaking to the 60, 70, 80 people in the room, it's more likely that one of those people or 2 people will come up to you afterwards saying, I could use your services. I think we can do some business together. And that's why being that key person of influence at the front of the room, as opposed to just sitting in the audience, is so incredibly powerful. So I guess it was just a little bit of a morale boost, maybe, to try and push yourself outside of your comfort zone, do some things that, you know, aren't necessarily, you know, I still get really nervous doing a lot of these things. I think people don't understand that. Like when I'm speaking on property question time, I'm sweating. That's why I have to wear a jacket. You know, it's as simple as that. I still get very nervous doing these things, but I understand the benefits, and the, you know, the reasons that I'm doing it are way greater than the sort of initial nerves going into the event. So yeah, hopefully that's useful for people.
Shall I take this one?
Mm-hmm.
We are hiring. So yeah, we've got, I suppose, our central services or people in the office you could call in XP Property. I've just noticed that it's actually XP Surveys that's the banner there, but we're also hiring an XP Surveys. But we're hiring for an office and estate manager based in Henley-on-Thames. We're now obviously building our portfolio, which means we have more requirements for resource, and it's not a great spend of our time for our technical project manager, for an example, to be dealing with some of the project stuff that we've already finished and delivered. So if you know anyone that has office management experience or estate management experience, please do reach out. We're happy to pay referral fees, and is going to be based in our office and managing our portfolio, and also a fundamental part of the office team. We actually always do team reviews, and the most common thing that they first say that they enjoy the most about the company is the culture and the people around them. So we can't necessarily put our hand up and say that's to do so much with us. It's the employees also around everyone else. So reach out. But we're also hiring an XP Surveys for a CAD technician. So again, anyone technical from a surveying perspective, reach out. We'd love to take a look at CV and have a chat.
Nice. Cool. And if you want to work with Jack or I in a boardroom setting with 10 to 12, hungry individuals that want to grow their property development businesses, then we do have the XP boardroom. So comment boardroom below or reach out to one of us and we can send you further details on that. Vegas, cool. Baby.
Running to Vegas with pros and cons. So I went to Vegas this last weekend for a stag do. The stag is coincidentally an investor in XP Property. We've got a project with him. So you could call it semi-business, semi-play or work, whatever you want to call it. But I actually spent most of my time with a good friend that I shared a house with at university called Johnny, who is running an Amazon FBA business, which is basically where he buys items at wholesale price and then sells them via the Amazon platform. He scaled his operation in about five to 6 years. From basically zero turnover. I can remember when he was doing it out of his own house. All of his stock was all around. I loved it because I used to go around his house and take a rucksack and just fill up my bag with all the essentials like toothpaste and coffee and things. But he's now scaled it to a 4,000 square foot industrial building, and he packages up 1,500 deliveries per day. And his stock turnover is pretty much gone within a few days. And he's constantly buying from wholesalers on pallets and trading out the door. And I think he's sort of breaching on about 3 million turnover, and he's trying to take his existing space to 5 million. But the reason that I'm mentioning this, and the reason that I love this, and Johnny will probably watch this because he does tune into these episodes because they're absolutely amazing for business coaching and anything to do with business, is we started sharing notes. You know, I was saying what the pros and cons to his business, what he's good at in his business. He's all systems and creating algorithms for his business. All of his stock orders and dispatches are completely automated. So there's not one person that's in charge of that. It basically detects what needs to be in, what needs to go out, and it all manages that for him. And that's a very systematical business, and it has to be because it's a high stock turnover, high transaction, low margin business. And if you're spending the time we do on the transaction, it wouldn't work. So it was super interesting to get into his head. And what I did learn from that is his is quite a cash-rich business. You know, every day he might be 2 or 3 grand up. Whereas in our business, it's the opposite. It's the opposite of cash-rich. It's asset-rich, especially if you try to hold the stock at the post part of a development. And coincidentally, Johnny's actually had experience in property. He'll admit himself he was kind of like the accidental landlord, thought he could do a development, spent too much on refurb, didn't know the planning process, still hasn't got builder consult sign off. You know, it's not a great yielding asset. He hasn't refinanced it to leverage his position. And it was interesting sort of sharing how if it comes to a highly transactional business, he would be a much better fit for it. And I would probably be more likely to be the investor in that situation. But he was saying with his surplus money, he would more likely invest in a property developer or a property investor like us, to know that the value that we're adding far exceeds the sharing of the profit that we're in. But it was super interesting to sort of compare what we're doing and see what his vision for his business is. He's currently thinking about when he scales it up to maybe 5 million, he's at capacity with his warehouse, whether he goes bigger to like a 20,000-30,000 square foot warehouse. And I then sort of said, I'm starting to think of XP surveys, how your overheads to run a £5 million business are not the same overheads that you have when you run a £20 million business. So you kind of really do need to go big, because you'll find a sort of sweet spot for the size, and he's limited to storage space. So that will have a critical mass size and a profitability mass size. And then as soon as you go bigger, you then have to kind of remake the model, and it's not going to be the same management team. It's not going to be the same floor management team for the stock controls. It's going to be a completely new beast. You're going to have middle management, so you have to go bigger. And I was kind of explaining the XP growth, like we could do but to get to the big numbers, there's a millions in delivery, you do need that another layer of team that can adapt and deal with that. So it was super interesting. It kind of opened my mind to those things. And I also went with traders who are just like trading finance, and they are just purely cash rich, and they do serious amounts of investment. The guy Stag, who was.
What's Johnny's biggest issue in his business at the moment?
That he can't spend enough money on stock. So yeah, I was trying to like pick holes in like what he can and can't do, but basically he was saying that he can only sell what he buys, and he sometimes can't get hold of the stock that he needs to buy. He also can't be with a lead supplier such as a PG Tips, for an example, because he's not big enough. So he's not ordering enough stock. So to be a supplier, PG Tips are sat there at their operational desk, and they are sending shipments to Tesco, Asda, One Stop, who then distribute it even further, but not Johnny. So Johnny, to get scale and sell the really good stuff, he does really have to go big, because then his contract is big. Whereas PG Tips aren't interested in 400 grand's worth of tea order a year. That just doesn't interest them. So actually getting the money out the door with good products. His algorithm like picks what's in demand and what's got margin on Amazon. So it kind of tells him where he needs to focus his time. So that's one challenge I think he probably has. I think he's had obvious challenges with like staffing. He had issues where he's remote, so he brings a member of staff in and he hopes that they can run it. He's got a warehouse manager, but that's kind of his Achilles heel. If that warehouse manager drops away or does something, he's got to get back into the business and rework it and sort of produce that. But I think his business is in a pretty good place. He said that it's quite a volatile market in the Amazon reselling space at the moment. There's a lot of SMEs that are actually really struggling. By fault that apparently Amazon had a bank facility that you could use, and people were using that as their cash flow for stock, and they've removed that. And he said there's a lot of businesses that are basically gone pop. So I suppose learning is always thinking about the risks ahead of you in a business. But yeah, it was super interesting. And the other people on the trip were traders. So they're trading stocks, and they're on a salary, but a really healthy salary. And it was just really interesting to be around a load of people that were cash rich, asset poor, and I was like the opposite. I felt
which would you prefer? I think I'd prefer the cash.
I mean, the cash did look more fun from a viewing perspective,
from a roulette perspective. Yeah. Nice, very good. Cool. Onto something a bit more our neck of the woods with property, and I'm sure everyone listening to this who's done a property development or even a refurbishment will have had variations of some kind to your builder. Your builder said, "Oh, I didn't quote for that," or "That wasn't included," and you want this change, so that's going to be an extra $5,000 and all this sort of stuff. These are variations, and when variations come into your building contract, it can be quite stressful because you've not accounted for it. You really have to do your due diligence to understand where it's all coming from and if there's validity in the claim. And I just wanted to talk about some of the key things. I think when looking at variations, one thing I would say, they are inevitable. You won't find a project whereby something isn't different, or you don't want something changed on site, or you see it in the flesh and you think actually that would look better over there. Well, if you say that to a contractor, they're going to have to change what they've done, and there's going to be an additional cost to that, and you kind of have to accept that. So that's fundamentally why you have contingencies. But a few top tips. First one being making sure that you've got a rate sheet of some kind agreed up front, or it goes to show the importance of contractors breaking down the costs. I've got a couple of clients in Aura at the moment, which I'm not really happy with how the sort of tender process is going, because they've got a quote and it's 20% lower than one of the people that we've put forward. But it's an email, it's an email saying that the contract value is 250 grand. And when you ask for a breakdown, they say, well, they either don't have it, or it's broken down so high level. It might just be, groundworks this, superstructure this, kitchen fittings this. Well, that's all well and good, but that's not going to help me in the long run, especially if there are variations. In order to really narrow into the detail of where those variations are coming from, you need an actual breakdown of the individual elements and the individual costs associated with that line item. And if you've got a fully tendered bill of quantities, it's so much easier for you to turn around to a contractor and say, why are you charging us £4,000 per linear meter for this foundation when you charged us £2,000 per linear meter when we actually signed up on this contract? Clearly, the contractor is just trying to pull the wool over your eyes. And we've had that numerous times with our both our developments and my architectural clients with Aura, where day one, contractors have come back for we found this in the ground, we've had to do X, Y, and Z. It's come back at £9,000, and we've gone around and said, well, look, I agree there's a variation, but based on your rates from day one, this should be £3,000. And they've said, oh yeah, you're right. And it's not uncommon for them to just try and pull a fast one. So you have to be prepared, and you have to be prepared from a objective perspective, where you've got physical numbers that you're working to, that you can show them to say there's no reason why you should be charging me £10,000 when it should realistically be £4,000 as per the contract breakdown of costs. So that's one really good thing to make sure that you've got in your process, making sure you've got full breakdown of costs. Then there's lots of technology out there that you can use. So we deal with RFIs. If you've not sort of done big contracts, a lot of builders will just say, send a WhatsApp message, say we need X, Y, and Z. Okay, well that is a request for information, which is what an RFI is. But when you get into bigger contracts, you start working with better contractors that have more management in play, they will have a RFI process, and they'll want you to kind of follow that, or you have to agree how that process works. There's platforms you can use like DocHost, FON, FONN, and these basically give you transparency, and any request that the contractor has comes to you in an email. You formally respond to that. If it's a change in the contract or change to a drawing, then obviously there might be a variation that comes off the back of it. But it's basically a formal process that helps you manage and track requests for information and variations to your contract. So yeah, another top tip there. And top tip number 3 is about it all being in the detail. So this is where having a good quantity surveyor, having a good architect on board, packaging up the drawings and the tender information succinctly so that nothing is missing. There's no scope gaps. What we often find is the biggest issue and the cause for concern is where you've got two interfaces. So it's where like your plasterer needs to get in there and do something before your electrician does, and the plasterer is saying, well, I didn't quote for that, I thought the electrician was going to do it, and your electrician says, well, I thought the plasterer was going to do it. All of these things are scope gaps that need to be closed, and that's what a good QS and a good drawing package will do for you. So make sure that you're getting that as tight as possible. And fundamentally, it all comes down to your relationship with your contractor, building relationships, good relationships from the start. Jack and I have just agreed to split a variation cost down the middle with one of our contractors. It's valid. We didn't we sort of agreed our MEP package as part of the contract value on this is what we want to do it for. They've gone out tender, they've come back, say, look, it's a little bit more than what we had agreed previously because of X, Y, and Z. Can you agree to pay some of this towards the variation? And it's valid. Jack and I agreed to split that cost 50-50. It's a variation, it's an extra, but to move forward, it was the best thing to do in that situation. And these things are going to happen. So make sure your relationship with your contractor is strong, and you can manage variations in the best way possible. So hopefully that's some good tips for you. Cool. I am sure that if you come to the Property Investor Show tomorrow, on the 4th and 5th of October, Friday, Saturday, which is either today if you're listening to it, but we're pre-recording this on a Thursday, spoiler alert, because we are going to be at the Property Investor Show tomorrow, and we'd love to see you. Jack, you wanted to run through some of this?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we have got a special giveaway. If you are listening to this and you're already not looking forward to the weekend because you haven't got anything booked, we have a spare ticket that we're going to be giving away. So make sure you comment ticket or Property Investor Show, and it will be first come, first served. We might have more than one spare, but I'll have to confirm on that. But anyway, we'll be giving a giveaway, and it's an event that we've been to already. It's in the Excel in London. I think there's thousands of people that actually walk through the door. There's all sorts of things around furniture companies, finance companies, people doing talks, including Ben and myself. I'm talking on a panel about developments. I'm talking on a panel about high-end HMOs, and you just come along, walk around all the stands, and then there's talk rooms in the middle of the stands and also upstairs at the back. So if you're listening to this and you'd like to come along, and this one's going to be on us, the reason we're doing it is because we don't need all the tickets, and we want to give back to our beautiful audience.
Very good. Hopefully see you there. Cool. And if you want to see some of the stuff that we've been up to, on the 17th of October between 12 and 5 p.m, we are doing another one of our site tours. We had about 40 people in the spring. Come and visit the Old Malting, St Andrew's Court and West Street, Marlow. If you want a ticket, there'll be a link down in the description, or you can visit bit.ly/XP tour to find out more. But we'd love to see you there. It's a great opportunity for you to ask all of the pressing questions that you have for both your business and to understand what we've done on our sites. We're going to be talking through how we funded the sites, how we've structured it, what finance packages we've got, how we've got through the planning stages that we've done, all of the ways in which we've sort of managed the contractors on site, and how things are going now from a sales perspective on some of the finished stock. So yeah, really jam-packed day. Everyone that comes on this gets so much value from it. So if you are interested in joining the waiting list and coming with us on the 17th of October, then message us or click the link in the description. Cool. HMO officers.
Yeah, so I mentioned that they're either friend or foe. Now we've obviously been doing HMOs for quite a while, and on the first HMO that we did, I don't know why. I think it was because we were super green and we didn't really know what we were doing so much so. This is going back quite a while. We actually paid and if you can see on the screen, it's £178 for additional HMO advice visits. And what that looks like is you basically, back in the day when I started, this is showing my age and inflation and how long we've been doing it. It was £100. Now it's 178. I don't know whether that's time or inflation, but I feel haggard, so maybe it's time. But we pay them 178 quid, and that sounds like a lot of money. You think someone rock up, walk around the site, come back to you with some feedback. But the reason that we do that is because on the first HMO that we did, we weren't aware of all the compliance details that you need to integrate within your property. What is the best time to understand exactly what you need to deliver in a property? Probably around the sort of stud work, first fix type kind of period. So when you get a HMO officer to site at that phase, you're talking through the sort of feeling of the building, how it's laid out, the compliance, the fire, where the doors are going, the living spaces, how big they are, the size requirements. So if you can see on the screen, there's actually minimum standard plan there. And there's also the list of documents that you need for a HMO license. They're great, downloadable details, but it's really good to have a HMO officer to walk around with you. And the reason that I'm saying £178 is cheap is because if that HMO officer has walked around your site and told you that that's okay, this is okay, have you thought about this? Maybe you need a firewall through there. When they come back to sign it off as a HMO, they're not going to tell you to do as much work as they did before. And that £178 is huge savings on what you're normally expected. I don't think we've ever had a HMO where there isn't 1 or 2 comments at the tail end. And I feel that if you do this step, especially if you're new to HMOs, you will end up saving yourself thousands. And it doesn't benefit me telling you this because you're paying the council, but I can trust assured get the HMO officer out, especially if you're sort of new to the game, or you've even got quite a complex project, or even if you move to a new area. We're currently project managing a delivery of a HMO that's not in the areas that we currently have really good relationships with the HMO officers. So we've just suggested that that's part of the process. And it was a godsend because they've actually told us to move a wall out so that we don't have to worry about the size standard for the kitchen living space. So things like that are great, really valuable, highly recommend it. And if your local borough doesn't do the site visits, then you're stuffed.
Do you know if this is rolled out in every council?
I've just literally said, I don't know if it is. I said, if it's not, you're stuffed. Now, I would have thought that if there isn't a service on their website, you could probably just ask them, like email them and ask them. I think that if there's a product on their website where you pay them, then they've thought about it, and it's obviously it's kind of like a pre-app but for HMOs, but they actually respond to you pretty quickly. But I would have thought that if they don't have this product, you could probably hunt the planning officer down and just ask them to come out.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Good. So point number 7, the importance of finding utilities on your site. And this is something that should be done at the front end of every project. And we've come unstuck with this before. I remember, you'll remember as well, Jack, Hyde End Road was just an absolute shit show. Utilities all over the place, different meter numbers for different properties. Half the property was all one boiler serving 4 properties, with a water cylinder in one flat and a boiler in another flat. And it was just an absolute mess. So we've sort of, I guess, built a bit of a system of how we operate these things. Christina's done a good job of pulling together sort of a spreadsheet, which is what you see on the screen on your left-hand side, to understand and track the progress. Because what can happen is Tom, for example, or one of your project managers will go out on site. They'll have all the information in their heads and it doesn't get transferred to the rest of the team. So making sure using Google Sheets or something like that, you've got a centralized place where you can store photos, you can store utility meter numbers, and just all the relevant information that might be on site. And one of the things that sometimes you can't understand, and this is more for your utilities connection. So when you're making a new water connection or a new utility electrical connection for more feeds into the site, you need to know where the existing runs are. And the maps that you get from Thames Water, from UKPN, from SSE, from Cadent Gas, all of those suppliers are not always up to date. And to be honest, they rarely are, or they're extremely high level. It's like there is a pipe in the middle of this road somewhere, but you don't exactly know where that cable is running exactly. So there's a few things you can use for this. And I had one of these CAT scanners. So that thing on the right-hand side, which is like a little detector, metal detector, electric detector, whatever you want to call it. I was on site on St Andrew's Court yesterday with one of those, trying to find exactly where the line of the existing electrical feeds into the site are, because we have to get some of those feeds disconnected and we have to upgrade some of those feeds to install the new meter, 3-phase meter head that's going in. You can see I managed to sort of find where the junction was using the CAT scanner, got the builders to dig, a meter by meter square opening so that all of the connections and cables can be seen on the screen, which I'm pointing at there. And when they turn up on site, you're not going to have delays. They're not going to, turn away and say, look, you haven't prepped the site for us. There's scaffolding in the way, which isn't allowed. Or you've not dug in the right place, or we can't see enough of the information that we need. You want them to. It takes long enough to get utilities providers on site to do these things. What you don't want them to do is to turn up and to move away because they can't finish the job that they came out to do. So utilizing CAT scanners is a great way of finding the services on site. You might have to dig a couple of trial pits to find some, where your water pipes are going. But I think just the sooner you can get this, I guess my words of advice are, get this done as soon as you possibly can. Make sure you give your builders good time to find these things if you know that there are new connections going, because the last thing you want to do is be delaying the utilities providers even longer. Use one of those?
Yeah, CAT scanner. Yeah. So we bought a site. This is with my dad's, and it was obviously, this is Gravel Hill, Ben. Mm-hmm. And basically, when we did the searches, we got Thames Water Plan showing that there was water running through the site, and because the site was on a big hill, massive hill, all of the houses down at the bottom of the hill, all of their waste ran down into like basically a industrial macerator, and then pumped all of the waste back up the hill into the main system. And coincidentally, that pumped main came through the whole of the site. So it was a very important thing to find, because it's pressurized waste chamber that runs straight through the middle of the site. And it's quite a big site, probably about an acre. We knew where the manhole was at the top of the site, and we knew where the manhole was at the outskirts of the site. With the topography of the land, we couldn't actually depict where the line was, because we couldn't really see a lot. So anyway, we took to it with a 6-ton digger and a shovel and a CAT scanner, and got to about 20 foot deep until we found it. And it's pretty heart-wrenching. Being in a hole with a shovel, you can't see out of it because you're below ground, and it could in any minute get kinked and then filled with all the good stuff.
Probably not something that health and safety want to see in one of those. I mean, speaking about nicking something that you shouldn't, I did have a call from site yesterday. One of the builders is digging the trenches for the boundary walls at St Andrew's Court and put their jackhammer or spade through a gas main. So we had an emergency gas call out yesterday afternoon to patch up that piece of pipe that they'd put their spade through. So these things do happen, but if you use CAT scanners and use sort of spray paint to mark up where a lot of these things go, you're going to help all of your builders from making mistakes like that. Cool. And then when to use high interest credit facilities. There's a few out there, Capital on Tap, iWalker. There was another one at the tip of I couldn't think of what it was. I was going to put the logo there, but what other ones are there, Jack, that we've used before? iWalker, Capital on Tap. I mean, American Express is sort of a charge card, very similar, but they all work in similar ways. All of them are like 3% a month, if not more. So it's eye-wateringly expensive. But there is a time and a place for these types of things. Jack and I have spoken numerous times in the past about Amex cards, American Express. They're fantastic, provided that you pay them off in good time. If you go over the threshold of the timeframes of paying down, minimum or full payments, then you're going to be paying through the nose. But what American Express is great for is, racking up points for Avios points, for flights, for Amazon points, all sorts of stuff that the Amex is great for. So if you've got a short-term kind of need for cash, or you're buying a big lumpy piece of PC equipment or plant, or a big chunky kitchen payment, for example, using an Amex to get loads of points on that, and then knowing that you've got to draw down from the bank to then pay that off, for example, is a great way of using those types of cards. Capital on Tap and iWalker are slightly different. They're effectively, you get a 40, 50, 60 grand limit, whatever it is. You can kind of draw down those funds as and when you want, but they are eye-wateringly expensive, and interest starts racking up on a daily basis on those. So when would you use those types of things? Again, it's if you know that you've got a short-term cash issue, and you've got a drawdown from the bank coming anytime soon to pay down the full payment, then these types of cards can be really, really useful for you to keep the wheels moving on your sites. Obviously, this is not advice of any kind. Do your own due diligence, and the interest payments, if you do go over the timeframes, can be significant. So make sure you've got a plan to pay them off. But there are these types of facilities out there to help you cash flow your developments and your businesses as well.
Yeah, I think the principle of sometimes 3% a month from a cash card can be less costly than delaying something or putting something off or not getting it ordered because there's a sale going on or something like that. Yeah, as Ben said, do your own due diligence and don't just do something that we would do. Do your own homework. It's also worth mentioning Capital on Tap actually has a £1 cash back when you use it as a credit card, as well as the facility that you can dip into. And actually, mine and Johnny's flights and hotel was paid by American Express points.
There you go. Yeah, they certainly can rack up. I mean, we're doing a lot of FF&E orders with Aura. So that's fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. So people are using us for interior design. So we're getting savings via suppliers for bathroom finishes, taps, tiles, all sorts of things like that. That's coming through Aura. And Aura using the Amex card to really kind of its best effects, really. If we put £22,000 worth of FF&E through our Amex this month on in Aura, so we're racking up the points and can use those for various things, whilst also helping our sort of cash flow position, because we might order that FF&E, we might invoice the client, and then it might not pay for 5 days. So not only are we getting the points, but we don't have to pay the Amex for an extra 54 days or 30 days, whatever their payment terms are. So
and also one thing we haven't mentioned is points on any sort of points card is not a taxable thing.
Yeah, very good. So yeah, useful times to be using these types of things, but do your own due diligence. Cool. So we've actually got 3 questions that have come in off of last week's episode. So from Tom, I don't know which Tom or who Tom this is, but hi both, love this show. I'm looking to buy something which has been lightly fire damaged. What requirements are there when refurbishing a fire damaged house? Building control ? Etc. I mean, for me, the first port of call would be your structural engineer. The worst thing that you want is that fire damage to cause some serious structural issues with rafters and joists and walls, etc. So first of all, I would be calling my structural engineer out to assess and see what the level of damage has been. From a building control perspective, I don't really think there's anything specific around fire damage, provided that the engineer has signed things off and it's any faulty joists or timbers have been removed and replaced. I don't really see what the issue may be. I mean, we had when I went traveling with Laura 5 years ago, we went to this place in the Amazon. It was an absolute dive, a hostel, and there were exposed wires everywhere in the bedroom. Went into the bathroom, there's exposed wires in the bathroom, and then I could turn around and I could see basically that they just overlaid new tiles, and then at the top of the tile was just like black charred marks where obviously there'd been a massive fire in the shower and they've just been like, oh, we'll just fucking tile over it basically. Obviously that's no good in the UK, and there wasn't anything structurally wrong with that. It was more of a cosmetic thing, but I don't think there's anything specific from a building control perspective that would stop you from progressing a renovation and a refurbishment from that perspective. It just needs to be structurally sound, I would suggest.
Yeah, there's a few points that I'm thinking of that would be slightly in addition to that. So there might also be water damage from putting out the fire if it was a significant fire, which could even potentially be worse than the fire damage that is caused if it was just a small fire. And then also probably the biggest one for me is like insurance and financing. Like you want to make sure that if you're buying a project, granted there's obvious issues that are there that you can address with a structural engineer or even a contamination engineer if you need to get one in as per se, or someone to deal with the damp. But definitely thinking about, because it's not always about when I'm buying a property and we've bought Wallingford, which has structural issues. I'm not necessarily worried about the buying of it, but it's the selling of it and it's the person getting a mortgage at the tail end that really worries me. And I know that's really difficult to think about because it's like in 12 months or 15 months time. But if you can't get out of it or get a mortgage on it, you can get into a really sticky situation. And then last but not least, depending on how bad it is, I would have a bigger contingency for your professionals and also for the bill costs.
Yeah, I've never had to deal with it, to be honest. Have you ever had any fire
No,
damaged?
I bid on one ages ago, a house in like Wimbledon, I think, like even pre-UXP time, that was like fire damaged house, was selling for like 150 grand, and did a bit of work on that. I mean, it's kind of past my memory now. I've kind of forgotten about what that looked like and what, you know, but I think there's probably easier deals out there, but if it's limited fire damage, you know, if for an example there was a fire on the second floor and, you know, some timbers are burnt, just re-roof it and make sure that's budgeted for it. Like it's not a big issue, because if there's masonry there, you know, you can keep the same plate and just put a new roof on it. So I wouldn't necessarily be too scared to deal with anything in that capacity.
Yeah, best of luck with it, Tom. If you know, drop in the comments if there is anything that sort of we've missed or stuff that you found out on your project that we should be doing, so that we know going forward if there is any fire damage properties, we know what to do. Cool. And then Dino88, whoever you are, thanks for the comment. Dino, another great video, gents. Can you share any tips or advice on how to approach those conversations and negotiations with land/property owners in managing their expectations? And this was off of the back of last week's episode, I believe, where we were talking about, you know, the property market and effectively managing expectations of the owners, which is sometimes quite difficult, and sometimes they have to test the market to realize that their property or asset isn't worth what they say it is. And yeah, I guess that's where this question has come from. So Jack, yeah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, so I mean, the seller wants as much as possible and the buyer wants it for as little as possible. So the constant battle you have is to try and bring those expectations align. And it's really difficult for a buyer, i.e. Dino himself, is when you've got multiple competition that might not have done the same amount of due diligence as you. If it's land, it might even be direct to the vendor, so you might have the advantage of not being in the market space. But it's time and time again, we speak to landowners, building owners, and its beauty is the eye of the beholder. That they always think it's the best site since sliced bread, and you could get 100 houses on there. And it's all down to negotiation tactics. It's all down to taking in and absorbing as much information as you can from that person. Don't even bother boring them yet with what you may do or what you can do or how many houses you can get on it. Just absorb as much information on what their drivers are, what their expectations are, what they believe is the process that you need to go through. And when I say drivers, I mean price or time frames. Have they got time that you can sort of string it out longer to maybe pay a little bit more? That is sometimes okay for you. It might even be more cost effective to do it that way. And once you've got that information together, you can then start out sort of, I suppose, picturing the proposal that you're putting to the landowner. So for an example, we've had landowners go, well, I'm definitely going to get 20 houses on this site. And all you can say is, well, that's perfectly fine. I'll pay you £50,000 per house. And that then might meet their financial threshold. God forbid, you go to planning, you get planning consent for 14 because you got pushed back for 20, and you've now got the site at a better rate than you originally agreed. So it's all about thinking about protecting your business and your investment, to making sure that you're not sort of overexposing yourself. And that is a unit rate, which is similar to an overage. An overage is a charge subject to a condition later on in the contract, and that might be buying per house, per flat, per square foot, per net saleable square foot, or even just a lump sum. I'll pay you 500 now and 500 when I get the planning. So understanding what works for them is really, really important. Well, the beauty about projects is there's so many ways that you can cut it. You can always kind of improve it for both parties and find that middle ground. And you can always negotiate price or terms. If they're stuck on price, renegotiate the terms to suit you in better case. In actual fact, I've actually told Aaron, who works with me in acquisition sometimes, I'm like, simplify it. It's too complicated. But I get it. I completely understand it. So understanding what their drivers are. Sometimes you do just have to go open market, as we said. If their expectations are too lofty, sometimes you've got to go, you know what, go to open market. I can't see how anyone else would make this work. That's quite risky to do it if other people have got better resources than you, and you know, might be buying cash or have a construction business in house, or even live next door to the site, so they've got another incentive to potentially buy it. So you always want to try and strike a deal with direct while you are direct and without having to go to market, but that is sometimes the only proposed option. I personally feel like overages are great for developers because it de-risks it for both parties in the sense that they know they're getting a fair value for their land if you absolutely hit the jackpot and you get all the planning that you had hoped, but you're not overpaying it per unit. So you don't undershoot on planning and then have overpay for a site, but it also protects the interest for the vendor. I think the best way to do that is to make sure that when you achieve a conditional planning, and you have to pay an overage, make sure there is still planning gain value for you as the developer in that piece. I've seen it before where people agree a new land value subject to planning, but the land value is the land value as if it already had planning. You don't want to go to all the cost and risk yourself if there's not a back benefit to you in the overage condition. So staged payments, overages, there's multiple ways that you can structure it, and I'm sure I could talk forever about this. But it's the most important thing is in this is all about sort of sales negotiation, understanding the wants, the needs, and desires, catering for both parties, and creating a win-win solution. And if you can step back and think of that, you'll probably come up with some more creative ideas on how many sort of movers are within any form of negotiation.
Nice. I just had one more thing, and I know that we've won bids and won projects before because of our transparency. And what I mean by that is we've actually shown the vendor our development appraisal. We've talked them through it step by step. They've got an offer on the table at £2 million. We're at £1.5 million, but we've sat with them and we've showed them where the profit margins are, what the build costs are, what are all the additional costs associated with the project. And they've gone with us because they trust that we've done our due diligence, and that the two, what is likely to happen, and we've proven time and time again, is that the vendors accepted a £2 million bid from this other person, then come back to us 3 months later because they haven't performed. Well, they haven't performed because they can't buy it at £2 million. It's not feasible for them. So being transparent, showing them how we've got to our figures has often been the winning piece in the puzzle to actually get the deal over the line. So be transparent. Cool. Another question for the pod, which is the Ground Up podcast, as well as who was asking this?
No, I think this was for this channel.
Cool. Question can be for the pod, but also keen to know now, so I'm not waiting a week. But how do you split your time between the businesses? Do you assign days for each business? And if so, how do you then deal with ad hoc meeting requests? I've got 3 businesses and feel like I'm quite inefficient. Yeah, it's a really good question, to be honest. Do you want to go first?
Well, Mondays, I do my hair. Tuesdays, I work on XP. Basically, it's just all over the shop all of the time, and we're overworked, and that's just the fundamentals of it. There's no... For me, I mean, I color code everything in my diary. There's no allotted time really, other than internal team meetings that are weekly for any of the businesses. And actually, the most structure we have are the weekly things like this podcast. When I record the Ground Up podcast, internal team meetings, in XP surveys every Monday, in XP property every other Monday. And those structured meetings are the only allocated specific times. It's super difficult and important to be conscious of how many hours you're putting into each business, because some might require more or need more to manage risk, and some might require less. So as an example, with Central Suites, when we were setting up that business, I purposely only did viewings on Saturdays because I knew that I wouldn't want to give up half a day on a weekday doing small resi viewings. But out of coincidentally now, that business has grown, and I don't even really need to do the viewings myself anymore to get it under offer. So it's super difficult to manage, and I kind of feel that you'll do really, really well. Well, actually, you should never expect for it all to be completely perfect, and you do half a morning in each business, and that's how it's structured. It is all over the place. Sometimes you get phone calls and you have to pick them up, and it is difficult to manage. But that's just the nature of it, and you've got to play catch up sometimes if you're away on all of the businesses the same day you're back, and that's just reality and what I've been doing today. But yeah, I don't think there's a secret answer. I think the sort of 70-20-10 to some degree is quite a good rule to try and break them up, and then have that in the back of your mind when you're booking stuff in.
I think we spoke a couple of months back about Toggle and time tracking. There's like Clockify, Toggle, all these other sort of time management tools. I used it for a month to kind of see where my time was being spent, and it was very much a 70% XP property, 20% Aura, 10% XP surveys and other stuff, and that sort of split. But it was useful. You talk about inefficiency. Your question was, I feel like I'm quite inefficient. Using those types of tools, it don't instantly make you more efficient, but they can show you where the inefficiencies are. So you can then do something about it to figure out, okay, maybe I don't have the time to do this. I can scrap that out of my diary. I can do, spend more time, this week on this business because I need, it's having this issue and I need to solve that problem. But I also think it's where you are in the businesses, and what I've found, or what my sort of, where my headspace is at the moment, is because I'm at different stages within each business. So Aura, I'm very much more like the CEO type chairman vibe, where all I'm really doing is like sitting in on a couple of finance meetings, weekly team meetings, looking at management accounts, having marketing meetings on a weekly basis. I don't really do anything ad hoc as such with Aura. It's all like, it is quite rigid in terms of, this is the time of the week that I have each of these meetings, and then the team go off and run the operations. Whereas XP Property, I'm all over the place because I'm on site. I'm in investor meetings. I'm in town. I'm in Henley. I'm working till 1 o'clock in the morning. It's sort of all over the place. But like you, Jack, nothing is ever kind of assigned a day for each business. Even though I go in on a Tuesday, most Tuesdays to Clapham for Aura, in terms of that's where Aura's office is, 80% of my day is still doing XP stuff. So it's not like it's sort of allocated as easy as that. It is just quite difficult to balance and juggle your time. Yeah.
Nothing more.
Who asked you this, Jack?
It was Ryan Taylor.
Nice. Yeah, I know he's quite busy doing quite a lot of stuff. It is really difficult. I think being efficient and being organized is a massive skill set of any kind of business owner and entrepreneur. And I've been speaking a lot recently with Laura, with kind of baby coming up, and genuinely looking at my diary and being quite cutthroat with things. So why am I still doing that? Pass that off to someone, say no to this. And saying no is quite difficult, especially for people like Jack and I, who love opportunity, have the fear of missing out on certain things. It's really tough. Yeah, simple as that.
I think actually that one point you've actually just touched on there is time blocking. Mm-hmm. I actually feel that it's kind of more important to be able to manage your own time than to manage the business in your time, if that makes sense. Like, if you're more efficient with your time, you will have more time to manage the businesses, essentially. And like Ben said, thinking about, I often look at London meetings in my diary for one visit out there and back. I know it's going to be 2 hours door to door each way, so that's 4 hours, and it's one meeting. And I think to myself, is it going to break the world if I push this back to when I've got another meeting a week later, then I can do them back to back and be more and gain 4 hours? I think that is hugely invaluable. That's 10% of 4 hours. Yeah, 10% of someone's an average person's working week. And I think that is hugely invaluable. Another example, I was saying to Johnny, I reckon I worked 40 hours while I was away in Vegas. And it's kind of like that. Like, I just didn't want to come back to 40 hours to do this week, as well as another 60, 70 hours that I normally do. I just wanted to keep on top of things. And I think managing your own time is probably more important. But yeah, Ryan, no real, just work hard and hope it pays off.
Yeah, I think that the other key ingredient here is team. And we've said this so many times, like, we wouldn't be able to do as much as we do without a team then kind of operating and sort of doing a lot of the do within the businesses. So I don't know how your business is set up. Actually, I know we spoke a while ago in terms of Ryan, but getting assistants in place, getting management in place if you can, is going to help to spread the load and be very good at delegating. That's another key pro of a good CEO, business owner, entrepreneur. Cool. I think that's all we've got time for now. Coming up exactly on the hour. Hope you've enjoyed it. We'll obviously be back again next Friday at 5 p.m. If you've got any questions, please do drop them in the comments below. Share this, like it, and get notified when we release more videos down below. Until next week, bye-bye.